Alright, so the first thing we're going to be doing today is I'm going to be taking a look at the recent changes with patch 13.9, seeing if there's anything that sticks out to me as like changes to the meta or anything like that. And a big part of this update is the Nico rework, which I'll be taking a look at the end of this. But for now, I'm just going to take a look at any of the changes. I'll skip the Nico rework. We'll talk about the abilities actually. So the change to Nico, uh, they wanted to make her passive more intuitive because how her passive was working before is it didn't really find much use. They want it now where you can actually become jungle creeps and wards and blast cone, jungle plants. I think you can become a tower, but I don't know how that would work. Basically, anything with a health bar in League of Legends, you can now become, and you'll maintain that disguise unless they use hard CC on you. This game and more being streamed over on my Twitch. Submit your games in my Discord for review. So, before any damage would break Nico's passive, which made it like basically like kind of useless for actually like tricking people. What their hope is with this change is that this unlocks like a new gameplay style for Nico where she can set up like ambushes via jungle camps or wards or anything like that and really catch the enemy team unaware. We'll see if that's really a viable playstyle based off of like how the rework is going along and seeing if that starts seeing play, but it's a really tough, difficult concept to execute because it requires players not being observant. So, like for instance, if you disguise yourself as an extra raptor at the raptor camp, like most most players would probably like even if they don't realize it immediately, they'll look at raptor camp and they'll recognize that like something's wrong. They won't know what exactly might be wrong immediately, but they'll know in their head like this doesn't look how it normally looks, and that'll already get people, you know, little cautious. So it's definitely a very difficult play style to execute. So what they've done here looks like with the Q changes, they've added a bunch of bonus damage to jungle to really let her maybe become a jungler. Just because that style that they're changing her to really does fit more a jungling style than it does a laning style. Because most people will recognize a laner's gone. You know, they've disappeared into the jungle and become something. Whereas a jungler can definitely catch people more unaware. Let's see here. The quality of life buff with the better blooms here, just to make it so that way if you're casting Q at maximum range, it just casts it immediately if you press the button at your maximum range. That helps a lot when you're running at something or whatever, and that way if you're like running, if you're kiting away, you don't turn around and run back into the enemy team. Let's see here. So her W is now the move that lets her activate her passive. Let's see here. It now plays animations and sounds and jokes for duration. I don't know why you would want it to do that. Uh, oh, and it gives so they've added her W has an empowered bonus attack to monsters. So another jungling change to make her more of a jungler. And they've also moved that the clone spawns a little bit further away. It used to spawn 100 units. Now it spawns directly on top of her. Okay, that's more helpful for creating like confusion. So that's much better. E is pretty much the same. They just changed it to have a more of a scaling damage. And then her Pop Blossom, which is her ult, now knocks people up. Before it did not knock up. It was just a root after when she came back down from exploding. So now it is a knock up. Let's see here. After channeling for 1.25 seconds, she jumps into the air, knocking up all nearby enemies for zero point 0.6 seconds, then crashes to the ground with all knocked up enemies, dealing magic damage to them and stunning them for 0.75 seconds. Scaling with points in it to get to 90 seconds before it was just 90 seconds flat is a very strong ability, so it definitely needs to be reined in early, especially now that she's being kind of shoved into the jungle role. It's got some really good base damages at level 2, but not so much at level 1. I think that's good. You don't want a jungler snowballing early. They become too powerful. And it no longer grants a shield for her, which I think is fine because with this new style where you're knocking people up, you don't really need a shield. The shield was just there before for her because she had no initial CC to like stop the enemy from hurting her. They don't now she's got a knock up and a stun. It's not no longer needed. So that's interesting. I'm gonna be taking a look at that later on its own. So good to see. So let's see here. So Aatrox looks like his passive got increased based on level. So like towards the later game, around like level 16 or so, level 15. He's doing a little bit extra bonus damage. I think he could use that. He was definitely hurt a lot from a lot of the item changes, and he's been slowly coming back. But the thing is the meta in the top lane kind of counters him, especially with Poppy getting buffed last patch. So probably not enough, but it's good. Anything can help him out. He's gonna be seeing a lot more drastic play changes with the item changes coming up on the PBE. So in patch 1310, that's going to affect him a lot, I think. So there's a lot of items that are going to be that are being changed in that he uses or he could use. And a little bit extra movement speed on his R. I think that's okay. It doesn't really it's going to help him escape a lot, but I don't think most of the time people aren't just using their ult to run away, and most of the time his movement speed doesn't really matter because all it's doing is he's just trying to get into range to knock somebody up with his Qs. So a little bit of extra movement speed early doesn't affect that much. Amumu's W. W damage increased early. Let's see here. That's a flat amount at all ranks to 20. That is just as good as hitting until you put points in it getting it to level 3. This is really good. No Amumu. Amumu's only max W last. Across the board. Amumu jungle, Amumu support. So, a nice damage buff. Getting 8 damage at level 1. And see here. A small amount of percent health buff as well once you actually start maxing it. Which still, I don't think this is enough to change that. I think this is just supposed to be a nice compensation buff for him because they're going to be maxing this last. Doesn't change anything with the build order, but it's nice. Nice compensation. Belveth. So Belveth is getting a nerf to her attack damage growth in exchange for a 20% damage buff on her Q to monsters. I think that seems fine to me. I think Belveth should be she's a power clearer. She should be able to power clear faster, and right now she doesn't seem to be clearing. She hasn't been clearing too fast, so I think giving her this is pretty good in exchange for a slight base attack damage nerf over time. I think it's totally fine. Um, Looks like they were also seeing that she was not very healthy in her clear. I think that definitely makes sense. Without being able to she couldn't clear camps very fast. So she was taking a lot of damage. I think this is a good nerf or buff to her. I don't know if this is going to be enough to make her fully meta, but this is definitely enough to make her playable. Before I would have said she was probably not playable. I think this is enough to make her playable. Jinx nerfs, 100% needed. She's been dominating the bot lane for like 3 or 4 patches now. Uh, really, a really small nerf, honestly, so it's fine. But she's honestly, I think she might be the only ADC that even is being played bot lane. Most of the time, it's like not even ADCs anymore. They're really being shoved out of their own lane. But that's going to change with all those item changes coming up in 1310 as well. So they don't want to hit her too hard here until they have to take a look at that later. Uh, fair compensation nerf or for how strong she's been. I think it's totally warranted. Kale. Okay, so Kale's on hit ratio for her E is being nerfed. In exchange, her passive damage when she hits level 11 is being buffed. That's a little weird. I don't think it's another. The problem with Kale isn't her late game, and this seems to be pushing her to getting a nice buff late game, but I don't. It's a little weird. They're like trying so that they want her to not be maxing E basically is what this changes because all of their damage is based on her level instead of points in it. So they want you to max Q probably level 1 and then I guess E second. It seems weird. I don't. It doesn't seem like a change I would think that it's needed. The R buff is pretty big here. So cast time is only 0.5 seconds, which is how Kale's ult worked before. Is level 1 at the first rank when she would cast ult on herself, she had no time to auto attack while the ult was coming down. So now she actually has a second of being able to auto attack, so she can get an auto attack off, maybe even 2, before the invulnerability goes away. That's pretty nice. See here, in exchange, they've taken. Oh, they've nerfed 0.5 seconds of the invulnerability at rank 3, but in exchange they've given you 0.5 seconds flat since level 1. I think that's pretty good. I think that's fair. The radius of the R now changes based on points. That's a little weird. I don't think that was necessary. It already had a pretty big range. It didn't seem like it was very difficult to miss it. And it's more so about the invulnerability anyways for her whenever she's using it on herself. She no longer lowers her range. I guess that was a bug or something. I didn't remember her not being able to auto attack. They've delayed the swords fall where the damage actually comes down till the exact end of the invulnerability. So if you're putting yourself in a situation where you're like trying to get a big damage off with the R, you're also putting yourself in a spot where you're gonna take damage as soon as it falls. Fair trade. Big a big flat damage buff on it at level 2 and 3 in exchange for no more scaling. I think that's fine. I don't think that's enough to make Kale really good because a lot of Kale's problems is that she gets abused early game, and none of this helps with that, and that's expected because they shifted more power into scaling. So Scion passive health decay is getting increased. Oh, this is yeah, when you die. Okay. Yeah, yeah, when Scion's death recently, like his passive when he dies, it definitely lasts too long. It definitely needs this nerf. That's totally fine. The guy will be alive for like 15 seconds after being dead. Like that's ridiculous. Swain's getting a buff. This is to his laning actually, because most of the time you're seeing Swain support probably. So this is a buff to Swain lane, because before Swain had a mana refund on his Q when he killed minions. They took that away a long time ago, and ever since Swain has never really been. He's been struggling in solo lanes. So they're finally giving him a little bit of a buff here. Looks like 5 flat damage at every rank, as well as 2% AP, just a little bit. More damage bonus per bolt, so if you're up in their face and you're shotgunning them, you're doing good amount of extra chunk. That's up to, I think there's 5 bolts in that, so you're getting 15 extra bonus damage at level 1 if you're in their face. I think that's good. And then the maximum magic damage or whatever that it can do is up by 17 plus AP plus 10% AP ratio. So I think that's good. I don't. This might be enough to see Swain get play, because right now, most mid lane mages are weak. And that's what Swain usually struggles with. So it seems here, Talia's R is getting nerfed, so that, or getting a little bit of a buff. It looks like, so if she only gets can't cast R when she takes damage. She can cast it while dealing damage. That means that while you're sliding on the wall, you can get a Q off. Not going to change much, but a little bit of a mechanic adjustment to make it like a QA buff. Feels better to player. Trundle getting his base attack speed increased and his base mana increased. That's a large mana pool buff of 60 mana, and the attack speed is helpful. This I think this buff is more useful to Trundle support than it is to Trundle jungle. Just because Trundle jungle wasn't really in a bad spot. He's just always been a counter pick. Like he counters a meta where you have tanky junglers, and we don't really have tanky junglers right now. Like he's still playable anytime the enemy's locking in Sejuani or Zac or anything like that. So, but this is a pretty big buff to support Trundle. If the melee meta comes back and it gets a little bit out of control, maybe Alistair's coming back into the meta. They've been trying to push him back in recently. I can see Trundle support getting played. That gives that gives enough mana where you have a whole extra pillar you can cast, and that really matters because Trundle doesn't have very much mana. So it's nice. Volibear, W damage and heal increased. Volibear is like, he seemed fine. He seemed balanced. This is like a little bit of a balance buff just to give him a little bit more something. He's probably getting abused by ranged top laners, which most top laners are, but just giving him a little bit extra. I honestly thought he was balanced. He didn't seem like he was in a bad spot at all, especially top lane. I don't think he's in a good spot in the jungle. Lichbane just receives a 10 AP buff. This goes along the lines of they've been buffing Fizz. They've been buffing a bunch of other AP assassins. They're trying to get AP assassins to be playable again, and the Lichbane buff goes along with that vision they've had. I thought Fizz was already doing pretty well, but it looks like they want him to be doing even better. Expanded emote wheel. This doesn't matter. I don't think anybody cares about this. Bunch of ARAM adjustments, behavioral systems. So they've changed it so you can report people inside of the game. I don't know how useful that is. It's like if you forget that you wanted to report somebody for something. I feel like if you forget that you wanted to report somebody, then they didn't do something that you really cared that much about reporting. So it seems kind of useless. It might even be clunky. I've heard some problems that it's introduced some problems with the clarity of the tab menu. Seems unnecessary. Don't know why they did this. Consolidated mute options into new panel. That's another thing. I think the mute options were already fine. They were 3 in a line. You just go click, click, click. They're completely muted. I don't see why introducing another menu you have to open up helps. That's probably the opposite of what you want for usability. Doesn't matter. bunch of bug fixes here. I'm looking to see if there's any actually matters. Aether Wisp is sometimes no longer giving 5% movement speed upon death. If that was happening often, that's annoying, but I didn't recognize it for sure. Blitzcrank's E applying Glacial Augment for longer than intended. That might have been a thing that I've experienced because I've been personally banning Blitzcrank a lot, and I did feel like he was pretty oppressive with Glacial Augment. I wonder how often that would have applied. That might have definitely been something I have personally experienced. Besides that, we got some new skins. Ink Shadow skin line. These look pretty good. I think personally, my favorite probably looks like I like the Yone. I like the Yone and the Aurelion Soul. Aurelion Soul doesn't have too many skins, so that's pretty cool. Got some chromas for him too. Get some emotes for MSI. Join my Discord and submit your games for the next VOD review.